Good morning, Little Masters, and welcome to today's Tolkien Times. I'm the Man of the West, also from the Prancing Pony podcast. Now, thank you for joining me today for folks' favorite Fandom Friday. Now, every Friday, I get the chance to visit with somebody from the wider world of the Tolkien fandom. Writers and musicians, artists and craftsmen, scholars, content creators, and a whole lot more. And today, I'm joined by someone you almost certainly don't know, but that's why I've asked him here. He's been working behind the scenes on Tolkien's letters for more than 6 years, and he's now an integral part of the Guide to Tolkien's Letters, now available at the Tolkien Collector's Guide website. That's tolkienguide.com. Folks, it is time to pay attention to the man behind the curtain, Phil Walch.
Hi, Alan. Thanks for having me.
It is my pleasure, Phil. Thanks for joining me very much. Now, first, the question that I have to ask everybody who comes on today's Tolkien Times, or even the Prancing Pony podcast for that matter, how and when did you first encounter Middle-earth? And what is it about Tolkien's works that keeps you coming back?
Oh, well, probably like most people, or many Tolkien readers, I started off with my father.
Yeah.
We read The Hobbit when I was 7 years old.
I love
and I was fortunate that my father was a fan.
Yeah.
So he'd been reading Tolkien for many years. And on our shelves, a little bit too high for me at the time. He probably didn't want me to ruin his books, were the Tolkien books. But we started on The Hobbit.
Yeah.
That was Christmas 1988. So it's a long time ago now. And all I wanted for my birthday the next year was my own copy of Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
So we developed, or I developed, my enjoyment of Tolkien through my father. Unfortunately, my father died 22 years ago. So my memories of him are not so bright anymore.
Right.
But my earliest memory of him telling me about Tolkien was during wartime.
Oh, wow.
And they would, because they were from Liverpool, my family are from Liverpool, as people may tell.
Yeah.
And his older brother, he would read books to them in the bomb shelters.
Oh.
So my father actually looked forward to the ringing of the air raid sirens.
Yeah.
Because it meant more stories. So he had a quite affectionate way of looking at the war for that. So it's quite nice in a way. So we developed a bond through Tolkien, but it wasn't until I read The Lord of the Rings, I would say it took me 9 months. I admire these people at 10 years old, or say at 10 years old, they read Lord of the Rings in 3 weeks. I don't know how they did it. It took me 9 months to read.
Yeah.
And then I read the Silmarillion. I didn't understand a word of it, truth be told.
You're not alone in that, I promise.
No, I was too young. I was probably 10 years old.
Oh, goodness. Yeah,
but my father already had the history of Middle-earth as they were coming out.
Oh, wow.
But it wasn't until most people fall in love with Tolkien through the Silmarillion or Lord of the Rings or The Hobbit. For me, it wasn't until I picked up the first volume of the Book of Lost Tales. And I read The Cottage of Lost Play.
Yeah.
You, Me, and The Cottage of Lost Play. And I was fascinated. To not delve too deeply, but my childhood was a little traumatic, like many other Tolkien readers. And that cottage in the garden, it gave me such an escape. It was wonderful. So I inhabited it with butterflies and bees. I knew every brick and every blade of grass in the place, and I still do to this day. I still remember it in my mind exactly as it looked then, and I built it out over time. I'm happy to say that why I come back has changed a lot.
Good.
It used to be an escape, and now it's the community because of the people.
Yeah.
They understand the obsessions of Tolkien fans, how they get hooked on a single
That's
line
true.
or a word. Yeah. And so, I'm happy to say that after many years, the reason for coming back has changed an awful lot, happily. So,
that's good.
That's my kind of story.
Wow, I love that answer. That is rich and sorrowful too. I mean, it's poignant, and I feel like I'm sure there are a lot of folks in the Tolkien fandom who can identify it at one point or another.
Absolutely.
And
you had a guest on recently who had a very traumatic childhood, and Tolkien was their escape, and that's a great thing.
It is.
That's a really fantastic thing, because people can take trauma and use it in different ways, and it can empower them.
Yeah. Oh, that's good stuff.
Tolkien helps that. It's fantastic. And obviously Christopher Tolkien is an enormous part of that. For me personally, because, the man brought us the history of Middle-earth.
Exactly. And brought us the Silmarillion, that would have been
exactly.
All languishing
of these wonderful
in the
texts.
file cabinets. Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely.
It's so often that we talk about the works of Professor Tolkien, but what we're really talking about is the combined works of Professor and Christopher Tolkien. Absolutely. Well, when we were talking about bringing you on today's Tolkien Times, you told me that you've been working on the Tolkien letters for at least 6 years. So that brings up a couple of questions. First, what drew you to the letters as your preferred area of study? And then, did you set out in that study with a particular goal in mind?
So, I was always interested, but what I found was that I had maybe 600 or 700 images that I'd saved of letters.
Oh, wow.
And I would reread them and go back to favorite passages. I had notes of individual passages. And then I thought to myself, you know what, this is too easy. I'm going to transcribe them all. Why not?
So you did set yourself a challenge, I see. Yeah.
Absolutely. I didn't do it because, not to quote an American hero to many, we do it because it's hard, not because it's easy.
Yeah.
If it was easy, if he typed all of his letters, then I wouldn't have been as interested, because there was the challenge to it as well. Finding a letter on an auction site that only had one side of a page, but there was just enough bleed of light through it so that I could actually reverse the image around, mess around with it on the screen, and transcribe the other side.
Wow!
That generally doesn't happen. But there are maybe a dozen out of all of the letters I had that I was able to use digital trickery and actually find out what he said on the other side without having it. And it spurred me on to keep going and keep transcribing them. So I catalogued it all in a text file and kept all of the details of links of pages. But then it very quickly dawned on me that most people wouldn't do that. They wouldn't decide to go and transcribe hundreds of letters and trawl the internet for auction sites and quotes from articles and newspapers and auction catalogs, etc.
Right.
It dawned on me that if someone didn't gather this information together, that it would get lost.
Oh,
and that dawned on me when I was looking for a letter from Sotheby's catalogue from 2003.
Okay.
And it was at that cusp where auction catalogues were changing to web pages.
Yeah.
And the image wasn't there anymore. But among it was a tiny little bit of information, a quote from Tolkien, a line here and there of what he said.
Right.
And these things were getting lost. They weren't available to the Tolkien community.
Right.
Most people didn't have the time or the insane addiction to trawling
let's
through.
just call it the inclination.
The inclination, the inclination to search through the entire back publishing of Christie's, of Sotheby's, Bonhams, and all of the other auction sites to find out every last quote that Tolkien or was used by an author on Tolkien. So I very quickly realized that I had, I want to say, about 500 unique entries that hadn't been catalogued anywhere officially. But they existed in 500 different locations, books, auction catalogues, auction websites, newspaper articles. So I started gathering them all together, essentially to keep them in one place.
Yeah.
I didn't immediately come to the thought, I'm going to share this with the community. There was obviously the problem of copyright.
Well,
right. We all have to respect that, quite rightly.
Yes.
But in the end, once I had a large quantity of quotes from Tolkien that most people hadn't read,
right,
I thought this has to be shared somewhere. So I started looking around, and maybe fast forward 2 years from when I first thought, I want to share this with people.
Okay.
It was a strange coincidence. In 3 days, I had 3 different groups ask me about a letters project. One of them I dismissed out of hand. I won't mention the names of the people I didn't go to work with, all the websites, but one I dismissed out of hand because I had a problem with how it would be delivered and essentially how copyright would be respected.
Ah, yes.
I had another one who I was very interested in, and I almost decided to work with, but I decided that I didn't want to work with them because essentially I wanted to work with Jeremy and the gang at Tolkien Guide. because I went to Jeremy and I said, look, I'm at the point now where I've exhausted every avenue to find all of the remaining letters that I know exist and I'm missing. And I know have been spoken about somewhere or on that website, but that website's now gone. Mm-hmm. Can I please ask your members here to share their libraries with me so that I can collate them all together and put a master list together of all of the known letters by Tolkien?
That makes sense. That's a good resource because Jeremy, of course, for those of you who are watching the show who don't know who he's talking about, Jeremy is one of the guys who, he started the Tolkien Collector's Guide, and he's one of the guys who runs it. And it is a place where Tolkien collectors gather together. If you want more information about that, actually listen to this coming Sunday's Prancing Pony podcast. We're doing an interview with him. It's at the very beginning of the episode, so you can just listen to that. We talk about the letters there as well, but from a very different perspective. So I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I wanted to make sure that I brought my listeners up to speed. So,
Jeremy has built an enormously knowledgeable group of people. Yeah. So I asked Jeremy, I'm thinking about working with this person, right? On their platform, and this is what I want to do. And Jeremy just said, whoa, wait a minute. Just hold on for 1 second. Yeah. Myself, Andrew, and Chad, that's Uriloke, Mr. Underhill, and Trotter, have been talking about this for a while. And we want to do this ourselves. So I took the night, I got a nice bottle of wine, and I sat and thought about it. Yeah. And I thought to myself, I'm on the website. I talk to these people. Yep. I know them.
You know that community. Yeah.
I went back to Jeremy. This was at the end of, if memory serves me, I think it was the end of May to the middle of June, thereabouts.
I said, what year?
Of 2022.
22. Okay, so just a little over a year ago. Wow, okay.
A little over a year ago, yeah. But they had information. They had an archive of letters. I had an archive of letters. So the first thing we did was basically 4 of us get together. Right. When I told Jeremy, you know what, actually, Jeremy, let's do this. You're the right people to do this with. Mm-hmm. Because not to say they haven't got enough on their plates. They've all got busy lives, and they're all busy in the Tolkien community. Yeah. But one of the important factors in my decision was people who were willing to actually put in a little bit of time. Yeah. Because, and the guys have probably never thought about this, but I think about, I plan things in my mind, and I have a weekly plan of what I want to get done. Mm-hmm. Never succeed. But
I'm glad to hear I'm not the only one.
No, it's impossible. Yeah. We all have busy
I'll be
lives.
Satisfied with 80%, really.
Exactly.
That's a hugely successful week.
Done. Yeah, fantastic. And having people who were willing to put in time, and also selfishly, people who are willing to help me. With this new.
Well, it's a huge task. To have a little help with it would be useful, to say the least. Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, I never mentioned this to the guys because I didn't want to scare them away at the time, that I had actually collated in my mind how long it would take us to complete this project. It'll never be complete, of course. No. But to get it to the point where we can say we've done everything we can, and now it's maintenance and building on it and writing articles, etc., which is in the future. Mm-hmm. And I worked out that we have between us around about 800 books, around 2,500 journal issues. At least, I personally have saved at least 30,000 articles, newspaper clippings.
Wow.
And all auction sites.
That's a large archive.
Yeah. So if we, my archive of letters alone is probably around about 17 gigabytes of data. It's 30,000 files. Okay. In total. Yeah. Images and text files, transcripts, etc. So I worked out that 4 people doing it with a book each a month, 2 to 4 journals, 25 articles, it's going to take us 20 years. So you needed people who were passionate, who weren't going to get waylaid on other things, who were going to say, right, okay, today we work on this, today we figure out this problem.
The scope of this is huge. Yeah,
it's enormous, and it will take us years to complete. And we have other plans as well to I don't want to speak too much because
I
know later on today we'll be doing a live stream to celebrate the publication of the new letters from Harper Collins. But we have other plans to bring maybe certain more light-hearted letters into the guide in the future. Maybe that'll be next year.
Okay.
To allow other people to offer corrections and offer tags and references and so forth and so on into the guide. So we have plans for all of that. And behind it, we're busy adding letters almost every day. It's Chronology by Wayne Hammond and Christina Skull is literally my Bible. Yeah. I was asked recently, how do you remember to connect letters that you might have written 20 years apart? And I told them, I don't. I have that just in chronology alone. Yeah. Literally just crammed with notes, and don't forget to put that letter with that letter, and etc.
Yeah. So the chronology, the work that Hammond and Skull have done on these things is
incredible.
Absolutely. Everybody who dives even remotely deeply into reading or studying Tolkien has a huge debt to them.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's a remarkable achievement.
It really
and
is.
It's not just the physical book, it's their updates, constant updates.
Yep.
It's their help.
Yeah.
Messaging them with questions that afterwards must look silly. And you think afterwards, why did I say that? That's obvious. But it's only obvious to them.
And it's
these people, they're so unique than themselves. And Carl Hostetter is another one, not being able to transcribe a single word of a letter. Yeah. Carl, can you help us with this? And 5 minutes later, he comes back, well, that says that.
Yeah.
Of course it does.
Of course it does. Yeah. Jeremy was talking about that as well in his interview, the fact that Carl is extremely able to decipher Tolkien's handwriting. To gift.
Carl Hostetter is remarkable. He is like the kind of the transcript spirit of Christopher Tolkien.
It takes definitely a trained and experienced eye to do that. We did our gathering, our PPP moot at Marquette last year during the time that they were running the exhibit of the manuscripts, right? The Art of the Manuscript deal. That was fantastic. But I'll tell you one thing you discovered looking at those actual manuscripts with your physical eyeballs on the page. Wow, that's hard to read. And on
that, I would advise anybody who's interested in Tolkien in a passion, in a way like this community is, to actually sit down with a letter of Tolkien's, an easy one where he's clearly written quite slowly, and transcribe it.
Yeah,
and then find you can find them online on auction sites, etc., and through the guide. Obviously, we have a lot of these the auction sites listed for the letters, and people can go. And in some cases, images still exist. And I would advise anybody to sit down with a single letter, a complicated letter, and see what they can decipher. And as you go along, you start to learn things about Tolkien, where he would stop.
Yeah.
And I imagine him sat late at night writing a letter, and he stops and sorts out his pipe and then carries on.
Yeah.
Because you can see where the stresses change in when he's writing, and when he gets excited.
Yeah.
That's one of the most wonderful things about transcribing his letters. You see when he gets excited and he goes off on a tangent.
Yes.
And it's so hard to read. And then at the end of the second page, he apologizes to the person. I'm terribly sorry. If you can read this, but if you can't, I'm sorry. And then he just carries on at 100 miles an hour for the next 2 pages. Why didn't you slow down after that? You apologized and then just carried on.
He just goes right on with it. Yeah.
He just goes right on. And even he couldn't read some of his writing back later on. And I mean, people like Carl. I mean, the 4 of us have become very decent at transcribing. But Carl and Wayne and Christina, and obviously Christopher Tolkien, the extraordinary lengths, the time that's spent. I know from a single letter, one letter in particular, I spent probably 4 months on, an hour a day.
Wow.
Just 3 pages.
Yeah.
Correcting, writing it down on a piece of paper, going over it, running your pencil on your screen or on a piece of paper with it. It takes a lot of time. And
but it
that doesn't even compare to Christopher Tolkien transcribing
the work he
thousands of manuscript pages.
And sometimes the little comments he would make in History of Middle-earth about his father's handwriting, you could definitely feel his pain.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
I know that my eyes now are not as good as they used to be.
Oh, I'm sure.
And it's all thanks to Tolkien.
Yeah. Well, it's a worthy cause, I suppose. Folks, really, those of you listening to this right now, be sure to check out that resource. The Tolkien Collector's Guide and the Guide to the Letters is fantastic. Phil, before we go, is there anything else that you're working on right now that we'd want to hear about?
Maybe. If it will ever get published.
Okay.
I naturally, through working with Tolkien's letters, I have gathered together thousands of pages of texts so far. And a while back, before even the guide started, I had an idea, and I started to chronologically order Tolkien's letters.
Okay.
And by chronologically order, I don't mean put the letters in order themselves, they were in order.
Right.
I mean chronologically by topic, so what Tolkien was talking about. So if he was talking about a subject from 1920 in 1964, I would arrange it to 1920.
Okay.
And it will be a long time yet, I guess. But once I am complete and I'm happy that I have all of the text possible from Tolkien, I started to put together themed chapters on Tolkien's life, but only using Tolkien's own words. No injection of opinion. No Tolkien did this, Tolkien did
So there's
that.
no editorial voice. It's sort of like reading the letters.
Editorial voice whatsoever. It's autobiographical. Affectionately called for now Tolkien on Tolkien, because that makes sense. So
that sounds like a fascinating project.
I have files set up with when Tolkien talks about 1920, 21, 22, etc. Ordered throughout his life. And the idea is to put together an autobiography using only his words. And I will expand it. Wow. I won't only use Tolkien's letters. I will use forwards and prefaces to other works, his academic work, for instance. Or I may expand it and have the rule that a Tolkien had to have said it. I'm still in the process of transcribing the letters from his parents when they were in South Africa, for instance. There's some wonderful little pieces in there about the Tolkien boys and about their life in South Africa. So that's what I'm working on alongside the letters. Well, they were born together. We'll see if HarperCollins and the estate ever let me publish it.
Of course.
But I hope that people would be interested in Tolkien's own words.
I think they would.
Humphrey Carpenter did a great job.
He did.
John Garth, wonderful. And they flesh out more detail. Because there's things we know that Tolkien did, but he didn't say. But I want to work on a slightly different angle. That's a really unique angle. Large volume, around 200 pages, I expect it to be. And I hope that if it ever gets published, people will be able to use it as a companion to all of those other biographies and all of those other chronologies and bibliographies, etc., and be able to look and see exactly what Tolkien said. He may not have said in 1920 what happened in 1920. He could have said, I was playing around with it in a week, and one single quote, a tiny passage, came from 6 or 7 different places throughout the 1940s to the 1970s. But they are Tolkien's true feelings throughout his life about what he did at that moment. And there's lots of pieces that come together if an editor can put them together in a sensible way and a way that people would enjoy. So that's what I'm working on, separate to the guide. But my main problem at the moment is getting the guide. And if the guide's going to take you, and if that's going to take you 20 years to accomplish, that's going to be a challenge to do both. But hopefully that will get published. And if it does, definitely, or if it looks like it's going to, come back to me. Let's get you back on to talk about that. For now, though, folks, that is it for today's Fandom Friday. But please come back next week for another Fandom Friday
to meet another of your fellow Tolkien fans and maybe even learn what niches of the community you might be interested in exploring. Now, if you're interested in joining me here on today's Tolkien Times for a future Fandom Friday, let me know by emailing bartleman@theprancingponypodcast.com. Please visit patreon.com/Tolkien Times to learn how you can support the show, get an ad-free feed, a monthly hangout with me, a bonus weekly episode, and a whole lot more. Please join me again tomorrow on today's Tolkien Times as we wrap up this week with Silmarillion Saturday. Now, if you're watching this on YouTube, please be sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Please follow or subscribe on your podcast apps, and follow @Tolkien Times on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. Finally, as Faramir says, go with the goodwill of all good men.